Right, okay, hi again. It's a while, as usual, but lots been happening. Basically, obviously, my book being published is a big deal.
Yeah.
That's we'll have all the details up there in a moment. But meanwhile, in the real world, a lot's been happening.
Yes.
We've seen, much quicker than I thought, we've seen the complete capitulation of Andy Burnham's government into Starmerism's sequel. Now, I knew that would happen sooner or later because of the enormous internal and external pressures on the party, but the speed with which this happens has now convinced me that there was some kind of stitch-up involved in Josh Simon's standing down in Makerfield, and basically I think Burnham was almost told, yes, you can run for Prime Minister as long as you don't substantially change from the Labour Together, which is now Labour First agenda. So that's one of the biggest things that's been happening. Internationally, we've had the crisis in Ceuta in Morocco, which raises a number of issues, including racist immigration policy in Europe generally, but why this happened when it did, and the evidence that the Americans and the Israelis now have a regime change agenda towards Pedro Sanchez's government in Spain, which is very serious. We have, on the back of that, we've had another pogrom, this time in Thetford. The response again of Burnham's, that isn't brilliant. We've got the whodunit in Devon of what's happened to Anne Widdicome at a convenient time for forces of reaction, when you've had a ministerial in America led by Marco Rubio calling for all anti-fascist and all anti-capitalist protests to be framed as terrorism. And last of all, we've got the disgusting racist witch hunt against Jason Adney in Cambridge University, where of course James Orr is based, and where James Orr has got his Peter Thiel financed what he calls it, kibbutz of conservatism. And the very fact that it's Frank Furedi's spiked group that has led the allegations against Jason Adney, I smell a rat. I don't believe that the academically that universities care that much about plagiarism, even if it was true, and I don't know because it's not my area of specialism. But I know plenty of examples of plagiarism in a market-led corrupt university sector. They've gone for him because he's actually black, and because his area of research interest is social exclusion and education. So they're the things I'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would have to do that.
No, I think that
might actually be it. Yeah. So right, let's go to Burnham.
Yeah. So we had a program about Burnham, and I was quite insistent on the fact that there was basically no possibility of a leftward direction for Andy Burnham's government, precisely because there's no longer any way for the working class to directly influence the politics in the Labour Party. Andy Burnham was leading a capitalist government, and so his primary source of influence was the state of the bourgeois government, right? The huge indebtedness to the bond markets. Yes. This is the force that determines the course of UK politics.
Yes, absolutely.
Not any incidental, and it is of course necessary to go through the sort of accidental reasons for the influence that whether that be Josh Simon's, etc. Yeah. But at the core of it is which class is running the Labour Party at the moment.
Oh yes, I agree with you. The Labour Party has most definitely become a bourgeois party, and this whole thing about the bond market. One of the first things he actually said, even when he was standing in, and it was a climb down for him as an individual, when he was standing in Makerfield, he was saying, "Look, we're not going to in any way challenge the fiscal rules that were inherited from Rishi Sunak by Rachel Reeves, which means that the bond markets and the hedge funds are still determining economic policy." So right from the day one, that was a signal that not a great deal would change. But as well as being a Marxist theorist, I'm also a journalist and I like looking at the nuts and bolts of how these things happened. And the nuts and bolts really do boil down to it's framed on what you say. It's all about class interest in the final analysis. The role of Labour Together, which has now become Labour First, the dark money finance which is poured into that, the stuff that was exposed by in the Canary, in Paul Holden's important book, the fraud. All of this stuff comes together, and the real signal that things were going to go really, really bad, much quicker than I thought they would. I knew they would ultimately, but the real signal was his appointment of his chief of staff. The way that things are evolved in this country, the three most important government positions are Prime Minister, Chancellor of Exchequer, Chief of Staff. The fact of his background, his connection to Flint which is this highly dubious PR firm that's represented BP. Notice that they've no longer got Ed Miliband on net zero, and we seem to be talking about drilling in the North Sea, and he represented Uber, who have led the attack on trade union rights in the UK, and Glencore, which has a highly dubious track record in the global south. The fact that this guy gets made chief of staff, that is a red light that things are going to go bad. And since then, look at the appointments to his cabinet. Look at the fact that, for example, Clive Lewis, who actually was going to stand down for Andy Burnham, is not Culture Secretary. That Lisa Nandy appears to have no problem with people like Larry Ellison buying ITN and buying ITV. So that's a big capitulation, especially given that as Mayor of Manchester, Burnham claimed to be concerned about press accountability and breaking up media monopolies. That's gone out the window. That's not even been mentioned. Token soft lefts. Angela Rayner won't even bring in rent controls, let alone really tackle the issues behind the housing crisis, the existence of huge numbers of vacant properties owned by oligarchs, the role of the banking system and the building and the private property market in manufacturing homelessness. They still rather talk about immigration and small bugs than the real causes of homelessness. So for Angela Rayner, basically, I mean, I've had concerns about it for a while. She has now gone completely into the bourgeois camp. There are so many others there. They've been talking. One thing that I thought for a moment, I misread it, that Burnham appeared to be talking about having a common European common defence policy as a means of going back into Europe. This is one area I'm slightly contrarian leftist, because I do believe in a common European defence policy. He's talking about NATO. He's talking about supporting Trump in his illegal wars, and he's talking about and he's also simultaneously talking about red lines on freedom of movement. So if you don't support freedom of movement, how can you support close integration of Europe? So it's a bill of goods. Basically, there are other things that I've slipped my mind at the moment, but it's a bill of goods. It's a bill of goods of a bourgeois government that is exactly the same as in Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
And I don't derive any pleasure from saying this, because back when I taught at Edgehill University and met Andy Burnham, I actually quite like the guy. But I'm sorry, this is crass class betrayal.
Absolutely.
You know.
And yeah, the events in Ceuta,
yes,
played a key role in the events of this.
They have. They've all gone together, basically. And at the end of the day, there's two things about Ceuta which we're going to talk about. One is actually the racist immigration policies of the EU, which match those of the UK. There's this disgusting policy which, basically, these policies have been driven by people like Viktor Orban. They've been driven by people like, who's no longer there, but his legacy is still there, and Giorgia Meloni, who ended up basically getting the EU to chuck money, for example, at militia groups in Libya that pose as a government. We don't want these people coming over to Europe. Treat them as you will. Well, that's just licensing, all kinds of stuff, human trafficking, sex exploitation, all of this, and that, of course, is why immigrants have then shifted to Morocco as a supposedly safer route through Ceuta. But then you've got the issue of Mohammed VI. Now, much as I condemn Europe's racist immigration policies, we've had plenty of examples in the recent past of autocrats turning on and off and using immigration as a bargaining chip. The first person to do that, the bigger, was Arday in Turkey, who, of course, managed to get support from NATO and the EU for his genocidal policy against the Kurds east of the Euphrates, and, of course, in the process got an Al-Qaeda affiliate into power in Syria, who's 10 times worse than Assad. Then you had your man in Belarus doing something similar with the Afghans, and using them in a cynical way to put pressure on Europe. It doesn't let the Polish government and the EU off the hook when these people freeze to death on the Belarus-Polish border. But Mohammed VI has his own beef with Spain specifically over the fact that González's government has recognised Western Sahara's right to national self-determination. And so he has skin in the game. But of course he's also a signatory to the Abraham Accord. So we know that although Mohammed VI has his own reasons for wanting to put pressure on Spain over their recognition of Western Sahara, he's also doing the dirty work of Washington and Tel Aviv, in that they want Ceuta, they want him gone. And there is actually now a concerted American effort at regime change in Spain. and that's really serious. That needs to be highlighted.
I think also we need to highlight sort of the misinformation campaign around Ceuta, and how it, not only how the right wing in Europe has cynically used this as an opportunity to stoke fear and pursue their, reinforce support for their policies, but also how that was a cause for it happening, right? Ceuta is a Spanish enclave, but it's not part of the free movement agreement in Europe.
No.
And the right wing constantly insisting that it is was, in fact, a factor for many Moroccans and Sudanese, Yemeni, Palestinians going to Ceuta because they thought they'd be...
Once you're there, you're in the EU.
Which are not.
It's not the case. Yeah, it's not the case. It's not part of Spain. It's a Spanish territory. It's not part of the Spanish state. Yeah, that is true. And of course, the fact that Andy Burnham then, bashing him again, all he can not constructively come up with is to mimic Farage's rhetoric.
Yeah,
and then within days of that, you've got a pogrom in Thetford, which in Britain, I mean, excluding Northern Ireland, because you've got the issue of like paramilitarism and whatnot. This is probably the most serious pogrom we've had yet, because people have actually been attacked in their homes, and that wasn't happening in Southampton. That wasn't happening in the earlier. We had people on the street, people being terrified in their homes, but the door being broken down and being bloody attacked in their own homes. This is unprecedented, and the lack of news coverage of this is, to my way of thinking, extremely worrying.
Yeah. It was there's such a degree of hysteria as well from the right wing. Zia Youssef, when this crisis broke out, flew to Ceuta and then posed in front of it like, this humanitarian crisis, posing in front of it like it's some sort of zoo exhibit.
Yeah.
200,000 people have come onto British shores over the course of Tory and Labour governments. Yeah. And comparing it to 50,000 people crossing in one day and going, just because it happened over a long period of time doesn't make it any worse. It's patently ridiculous.
Well, it's different situation.
And Tommy Robinson saying, imagine all of those people armed with AK-47s marching into the UK to, it's all of it is imaginary.
It's crap. I mean, where are the AK-47s? There aren't any. It's ridiculous. And he knows it's ridiculous. He might be thick, but he's not that thick. In fact, politically, he's quite astute. And it's all rubbish. But the fact that there's no fight back against that from the government, Burnham if he just turned around and look, this is ridiculous. I mean, he'd go up a bit in my estimation.
Sure. I mean, I think it goes to show as well that we can't trust the state, we can't trust the bourgeois to defend against these kinds of attacks. We'll come back one
in a minute. Some of the other dodgy stuff that's going on.
But also it shows this, that there is, I think, an emerging split in the anti-racist movement in the UK with sort of reformist, popular frontist tactics of the SWP on one side, who loudly talk about, constantly bleating, refugees are welcome here, and then when the gangs roll through the streets, just let them through.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then on the other hand, you have a more serious, a more serious group of all sorts of anarchists, of the RCP, of the Asian community, which has a strong tradition of resistance, which the SWP has discouraged at every opportunity.
This is actually history repeating itself. I mean, if you go right back to the late 1970s, the beginnings of the Anti-Nazi League were quite healthy. It was after the Rock Against Racism gig in Lewisham where the fascists got a good hiding, and what was then the International Socialists, then rebranded as the SWP, used the Anti-Nazi League as a recruitment conduit. But within 2 years, they were doing exactly the same thing. They were using the ANL as a recruitment conduit and steering away from any kind of direct confrontation with fascism. Carnival 2, the other day I was talking to some former colleagues of mine, a college I taught in East London, and we're all of an age where we actually remember Carnival 2, Victoria Park. The SWP stewards actually stopped, or tried to stop, anti-fascists. I mean, we told them to fuck off, but I mean, they're actually trying to stop us going to Brick Lane to defend Brick Lane from being attacked by the National Front. And after that, of course, the ANL's name was Mud in Brick Lane, and that's how the Asian Youth Movement came to existence. My God, do we need an Asian Youth Movement now? By the mid-1980s, the SWP had wound up the Anti-Nazi League because it was no longer any expedient use. And they were literally like selling socialist worker on the same street, on the same market as the BNP was selling the British nationalists. And ignoring, of course, anti-fascist action then stepped into that breach. Showed how anti-fascist politics work. Then all of a sudden, Jean-Marie Le Pen gets invited to Britain, to Westminster in 1990. And the SWP decided to relaunch the ANL, which again splits the anti-fascist movement. And again, it's all this sort of like refugees are welcome here. Actually, they're not. They're not welcome for the large swathes of the population, because the large swathes of the population don't connect things like the housing crisis to capitalism.
Yeah, and that is the task.
And that is the task of the left, and let's not be really engaged with it at all. And as for physical resistance, I think yes, people probably run a mile. Two go together, two are not mutually exclusive. So yeah, that's more of an ideological point, but actually it's a very good one.
Yeah, no, and it has important implications for the state of politics in the UK and the tasks going forward.
And of course, the state realises because they've started criminalising anti-fascist resistance even before it happens. I mean, when Rubio was talking at his ministerial, sometimes and Widdicome gets conveniently killed. He's talking about all sort of anti-fascist and anti-capitalist protests being potentially terrorist. That means it's a threat to capitalism, not that it's actually terrorism. But the fact that he's making these noises means that they are prepared in a way that the left very often isn't. And it was very interesting they referred to the Informal Anarchist Federation, because there's no such thing. If you go back to, I think it was 2014, there was a supposed attack by the Informal Anarchist Federation on a police firearms training facility in Blackrock near Portishead in Somerset. And two Guardian journalists who made an amazing work on Paul Lewis and Rob Evans, called Undercover, on the police special demonstration squad and the National Public Order Intelligence Unit. Basically, these are the people who were getting women pregnant to sort of infiltrate the environmental direct action movement and so on and so forth. But what they also did was they created this organisation which didn't even exist, and now it's being referred by name by someone like Marco Rubio, which suggests that ministerial is not just about resistance to ICE, which we of course support in America. We support the resistance to ICE. Yeah, I don't understand what I'm trying to say here. They're also talking with an eye to Europe and an eye to Britain. Informal Anarchist Federation was created by the British secret state, and now he's referring to it. And in this week, the cuddly face of fascism gets killed in a home in Devon. A very unlikely target, certainly not a target for the left, at a time when Camp Binface is doing such a great job of lampooning fascism in Clacton, and the Reformer in trouble. Farage is digging a hole for himself. Why on earth would anyone on the left want to kill Anne Widdicome? And I just keep thinking there's something very fishy going on here, because we've had a year of false flag type behaviour. We had this chap from Sweden, from Norway, who was recruited by a Swedish criminal gang, purportedly by Iranian intelligence. They had absolutely no point of contact with Iranian intelligence. We've had these various attacks and anti-Semitic attacks in Golders Green. We had a Jewish guy being beaten up in Golders Green by two people who identified themselves as anti-fascist action. Anti-fascist action doesn't exist at the moment, unfortunately. I should know, I used to be a member, and they certainly would never have beat up some Jewish guy on a mobile phone to see he was wearing a skull cap. Now, this is obviously dodgy stuff. And it's... I am beginning to think there's some... this sort of paranoia. I think they're gearing up to start criminalising certain forms of left activity.
I mean, they already have when it comes to Palestine action.
Well, that was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
But as I said in my recent Substack, that's becoming a hard turd to polish when you've got 70,000 butchered Palestinians and the genocide is extending from Gaza to the West Bank to southern Lebanon. I mean, the game is up. Unless you're really thick, everyone knows Israel is involved in genocide, so they've got to pick on something else now. When I was forced out of Winchester University, they mentioned anti-Semitism and all that, but what they really went for was the fact that I was an ex-member of AFA. And the only reason they knew I was an ex-member of AFA is because I had a complaint from a member of the English Defence League who'd been giving me death threats, along with the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys from America, on X, when I still had an X account. And I retaliated, and I said, look, I'm scared of you lot. I put more fascists in hospital than you've had at dinners. They report me to the university. The university then puts me on trial in a kangaroo court because I used to be an AFA and I actually retaliated to a death threat. And I lose my job. I'm told if I don't retire, I'll get blacklisted. And, that again was a shame of things to come. That's 2024. That's 2 years ago. 2 years before Jason Arday. We'll come to him in a moment. But they are moving. They're now shifting their focus from resistance, because they had to reinstate David Miller at Bristol, who was sacked for alleged anti-Semitism. They had to climb down. So they've got to find somebody else to attack the left with now. And it's going to be anti-fascism. I'm actually convinced of it. The moment someone mentions in relation to this guy in Yorkshire who's supposed to have driven all the way down Devon, Kildare, and going all the way back again. I don't know the ins and outs of it. He's in Belmarsh, but the moment I hear it say, "Oh, he's a member of AFA," or "He's a member of the Informal Anarchist Federation," I know we're talking false flags. They haven't said that yet, but I'm suspicious.
And I think this has always been the case, but I think it's increasingly becoming the case that the police are being given more latitude to enforce the law basically as they see fit, and not according.
I think the law's been weaponised. I mean, basically, if you look at what's happened, it's historically. I mean, okay, under capitalism to some extent,
it's always
always been there. But there have been what we call layers of mystification. The police also fight crime. The law does protect people up to a point. Those layers of mystification have been stripped away. You've just sort of the weaponisation of the counter-terrorism laws, the fact that you've got people going on trial for criminal damage, and the jury finds them guilty of criminal damage.
There was a woman arrested, I think, a couple of weeks ago for clapping near a protest regarding Palestine action.
And then you find the anti-terrorism stuff is bunged on.
Yeah.
Now, that is not the rule of law. That is tyranny. That is rule through law. And I do think that the Crown Prosecution Service has been weaponised to the point it's no longer fit for purpose. I mean, this is a time when they're letting, they've climbed down on it, but when they were talking about letting sexual predators and rapists and paedophiles out of prison because there's too many people in there, and they're chucking old age pensioners in there, throwing up bits of cardboard, saying that they're against genocide in flipping Palestine. It's nuts. I mean, not that it's likely, but if you join the police force, you really join to do that. That's when I come out of Hendon. I can't wait to get my hands on these pensioners. Protect and serve. Bloody hell.
Yeah. I'm also reminded, I was at an eviction prevention protest last week.
Right.
Where county court bailiffs were due to arrive and evict a family of 4 from their house of 30 years. Now, we'd been told that county court bailiffs do not have the right to use force to enter a property.
They don't.
If they're blocked by people, they have to go and get a high court bailiff. The police were called by a private bailiff, who used to work in the IDF, incidentally.
Oh, well.
Called the police, and the police said that if they arrived with more police, more vans, making illusions, imagine wanting to get arrested for this. And they told us, if you try and prevent the bailiffs from entering, we will arrest you all. And we had to stand down.
And that's not been covered by any mainstream media. No. So many things are not being covered by mainstream media. I mean, after the anti-Semitic incidents, which I talked about, which are highly dubious, in Hendon, you already had people verbally abusing pro-Palestinian protesters, for example, outside Barclays Bank in Harrow, giving a lot of mouths saying you're peddling hate, you've already hate marches, people should be banned. It was all yak, it was all chit-chat. After the 3 anti-Semitic incidents, which were clearly, 2 of them were actually put up jobs, the other one there was a guy with mental health issues. But after those 3 incidents, you then get a situation where where is it? Edgware. A magistrates court where there's a solidarity gathering of people who've been done as members of Palestine Action, where all of a sudden they're being attacked, but people are chucking bloody billiard balls at them. Now, that's not been reported in any media, local or national, apart from the left media and whatnot. But I mean, these things are happening now which are not getting reported. Which brings us to the whole issue of media reform, which is another issue which is something we want to talk about in the future. And of course, a big part of the manufacturer consent as it presently works is the corruption of the universities. It's within the universities that the foundations get the opaque right-wing funding from people like Peter Thiel. It's there that the think tanks formulate the policies. They're then transferred over both to legacy media and to social media. And look at some of the rogues gallery of people involved in there. On the one hand, you've in particular got Frank Ferrudi and the Spite Group and its link to MCC Brussels down in Canterbury. And at Cambridge University, you've got James Orr, who of course is the mentor to Paul Marshall, who pays Nigel Farage's wages, and Peter Thiel, and has his conservative kibbutz, which is basically a boot camp for fascists. They're recruiting fascist students, all very dodgy, all very unpleasant. And what have we seen in the last couple of weeks? We have seen a university lecturer of colour forced to resign from the same university, allegedly over course of plagiarism. Well, I was a university lecturer for 15 years, and I can tell you that basically there's that much dirty money in British academia. No one gives a monkeys about plagiarism. This is ideologically motivated. It's motivated politically, it's now motivated racially. People like James I don't want people of colour and people from disadvantaged backgrounds in universities like Cambridge. It would have been obvious if they'd made the first move. So Marshall knows Fruity down in Canterbury, and guess what? The pseudo academic who went to extraordinary events to look at Jason Arday's work and to see if there was evidence of plagiarism is a contributor to Spiked. Well, what a surprise. I would never have guessed that in a million years. But we seem to have actually covered everything we wanted to do in a very short period of time, which is great. Again, don't forget about my book. We'll put the details up in a moment. The next time we come on, unless there's been some, of course the thing is these days big stuff does happen, we might have a more theoretical talk about whether the new right are indeed fascist, about whether basically issues related to that as well.
And the tasks of the
tasks of the
working
left.
class. Just to touch on that quite briefly, I will say that while obviously the forces of reaction are gathering in various forms in fascist parties and reactionary bourgeois parties and all sorts of groups, that the forces of reaction, the forces of fascism especially, are minuscule compared to the organised strength of the working class. We saw this with the Unite the Kingdom rally. The first rally, they were able to gather maybe 150,000 people, and the left did issued a terrible showing where we were outnumbered maybe 10 to 1.
Yeah, it was scary.
Right? Because the leaders of the left did not organise any meaningful resistance to this.
No, they don't.
The second one, however, Tommy Robinson made a colossal mistake and decided to host the Unite the Kingdom rally on the same day as the Palestine protest.
Yeah.
And on that day, he was outnumbered 10 to 1.
Yeah, it was,
Right?
Yeah.
And so that shows that if the working class has is motivated to come out, is given a reason, a political reason for coming out, they will come out in droves. And the right will be defeated in the UK, but it has to be prepared for and organised for.
Yeah, I don't majorly disagree with that. It's actually, again, it's sad that it's an argument we had back in the 1980s and 90s, and we're still having it. I basically agree with that. But I think we need to explore it.
We can explore it in more detail.
In more depth, because this will be more about a news catch-up. There's not been a lot of theoretical analysis here. We've just been talking about what's going on. And my word, is there a lot going on? Iran, you've still got the Trump's basically locked himself into a war he can't win. Just loads happening. And of course the genocide in Sudan is going off the menu all of a sudden, which Britain is complicit in that as well, of course. Okay, I think that might be it for today.
Fantastic.
I'm on Substack as usual. You're on Twitch,
YouTube and Twitch,
and we'll be back soon.
All right.